She's not first-class material. That's all it took for them to move her back to row 28. But when the flight halted mid-takeoff and headlines exploded with her name, the same men who had erased her suddenly realized Audrey Lee didn't need a seat to change the course of a flight. She was the turbulence. Stay with us, because what begins as a stolen seat becomes the moment she takes back the sky. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Have you ever been overlooked and stayed silent just long enough to rise higher than they ever imagined? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Black Stories Untold with Love, and ring that notification bell for more heartwarming stories that celebrate strength. The terminal smelled like fresh espresso and polished ambition. Audrey Lee walked through it with the kind of grace that did not apologize. Her white slacks held their crease. Her cream blouse shimmered faintly under the lights. The handle of her carry-on never tilted. People moved for her without realizing it. Her presence was not loud, but it carried weight. Gate B14 came into view. She checked the time. Precisely 11 minutes ahead of schedule. Just how she liked it. Her assistant had booked seat 3A window, first class. No one next to her. Quiet. Control. It was a routine she had built to shield her from the noise of the world. At the gate, the attendant smiled with a little too much sympathy. Audrey handed over her boarding pass and waited. A pause. Then a tap on the keyboard. Another pause. There appears to be a reassignment. Audrey said nothing, but her eyes did not blink. You are now in seat 28C. Audrey held out her hand without a word. The new pass felt smaller, lighter, wrong. She walked toward the plane, her heels still clicking with confidence, but her chest had tightened just slightly. Row 28 was not where she belonged. It was too far back, too loud, too close to the bathrooms and the hum of machinery. She squeezed into the narrow aisle seat. The man beside her coughed without covering his mouth. The air smelled of recycled tension. She adjusted the cuffs of her blouse and crossed her legs. A flash of irritation moved through her, but she swallowed it whole. She had faced bigger indignities. A seat was just a seat. But still, something in her stomach shifted. As passengers settled in, she caught a movement from the front of the cabin. A man leaned into the aisle in first class. Dark suit, calm posture, eyes like polished steel. Jason Winters. He did not smile. He did not look away. He simply watched her like someone remembering a story he had once rewritten. Her breath hitched once in her throat. She turned toward the window, but the plastic shade was closed. The glass reflected back only her own face, composed, controlled. Her mind slipped backward for half a second, back to a conference room in Boston, a table of venture capitalists, a pitch deck she had memorized like scripture. She remembered his nods, his praise, his promise to call. Then the silence, followed by headlines she never consented to. Jason had taken what she built and built something else with it, bigger, louder, and with his name on the front. Now here he was, 2 rows ahead of where she should have been. The flight attendants gave safety instructions. The engine whirred. The captain spoke about turbulence and arrival times, but Audrey heard none of it. Her seat was gone. Her silence was not. She glanced back toward Jason. Their eyes met again. And though the plane had not yet moved, Audrey felt the shift. This was no accident. This was the beginning of something that would not stay in the air. Not for long. The plane jerked to a stop so hard that a tray of water tipped into someone's lap 2 rows ahead. Audrey barely moved. She braced with one hand on the armrest, her breath steady even as the cabin filled with groans and confusion. The pilot's voice filtered through the intercom, flat and clipped. Mechanical issue. Return to gate. The flight was grounded. Around her, passengers reached for bags and phones, already annoyed at the delay. She stayed seated. Always wait until the facts are clear. Movement before understanding was weakness. She had learned that in rooms filled with men who smiled while cutting deals under the table. A shadow moved through the aisle. Jason Winters walked forward with unhurried ease. He did not hold on to the headrests for balance like the others. He didn't need to. His steps were deliberate. The suit on his frame looked tailored that morning. Dark navy, silk tie, subtle watch. His presence gathered the air around him. Some men wore wealth. Jason wore inevitability. He stopped beside her row. Audrey tilted her chin but kept her eyes forward. Her heart betrayed her once. It would not do it again. Her voice stayed inside her chest, cool and silent. He did not speak. Neither did she. The man beside her leaned away slightly, sensing a conversation too large for him. Audrey's hands stayed folded in her lap. Her knuckles did not show tension. Her breath did not waver. But inside, her memory peeled itself open. A hotel ballroom. A pitch. Her prototype glowing on a screen. She had been younger then, less polished, but not less prepared. Jason had shaken her hand and said it was brilliant. Then his lawyers built something identical 2 months later. Different branding, same architecture. He called it coincidence. She called it theft. Now, years later, he stood in front of her again, not at a conference, not behind a podium, but in a grounded plane where the lights flickered and no one had anywhere else to be. He opened his mouth slightly, as if to say her name. Audrey rose from her seat. Not to greet him, not to give him anything, just to stand. Jason stepped back instinctively. Not far, just enough to give her room. She walked past him without a glance. Behind her, his eyes followed. She could feel the weight of them like static on skin. But she did not turn around. Let him remember what he broke. Let him feel what it was like to watch her walk away with her power still intact. At the front of the plane, the flight attendant gestured toward the gate. Audrey nodded once and stepped into the jet bridge. The cool air met her like truth. She adjusted the strap on her handbag. Outside, rain was beginning to streak the tarmac. The world had shifted beneath them just slightly, enough to shake the plane, enough to open the door, but not enough to rattle her. Not yet. The lounge pulsed with quiet wealth, polished wood, frosted glass. Bossa Nova playing low beneath the hum of whispered conversations. Champagne sparkled in tall flutes. Audrey sat alone on a velvet-backed armchair near the window, her tablet glowing in her lap, though she was not reading. Her reflection in the glass stared back with steady eyes. Across the room, Jason approached. He did not ask. He sat. The seat opposite her had remained empty until now, like the space between their names in a contract neither of them signed. He said her name, not loudly, not with force, but with a kind of softness that scraped against the years. Audrey did not look up. She let the syllables hang in the air, let the quiet eat away at his certainty. Time had passed, but his voice still knew how to shape her name with care. That was the part that stung. He spoke again, words spilled in measured tones. Regret, context, flashes of old warmth buried beneath apology. He spoke of timing, of missed chances, of a version of himself he no longer defended. She listened, not because she needed to, but because letting someone speak without interruption made them reveal more than they meant to. Her silence was not forgiveness, it was strategy. The lounge attendant came by with a tray. Jason waved her off. Audrey accepted another drink. She sipped once, her eyes never leaving the view outside. The runway lights blinked faintly through the rain. Jason leaned forward. He said he never meant for things to happen the way they did. Audrey set her glass down. She remembered what it felt like to sit across from him before, Back then, the world had still called her promising, not proven, not powerful, just potential waiting to be molded. He had looked at her like a future he could shape. She had let him, until the moment he did not call, until the launch with her code dressed in his name, until the settlement offer arrived without warning, neatly typed and soulless. He had taken everything but the one thing she could not lose, her resolve. Now he said he wanted to fix it. Audrey finally looked at him. His eyes searched her face like he was still hoping to find the girl who used to believe in him. She was not there. The woman before him had been forged in fire he started, and she did not burn. She said nothing. He said he admired what she had built, that she had done it without him, that maybe she had done it because of him. She let that sit. Jason asked if they could talk again, privately, over dinner. Audrey stood. She adjusted her sleeve and gave a nod that meant nothing and everything. Not agreement, not refusal, just power. Jason remained seated as she walked away. For the second time that day, he watched her leave. This time, there was no jet bridge. Only her silence and his reckoning. Rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling windows like a ticking clock. The runway lights blinked in the distance, swallowed by mist and delay. Audrey stood near the far end of the lounge, where voices softened and deals stayed unspoken. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Her assistant's voice came through, crisp despite the static in the air. The final paperwork was ready. The merger would be announced by morning. Audrey's name would headline it. But then came the twist. One of the holding companies buried deep in the structure belonged to Jason Winters, a shell corporation folded inside another. Clean, legal, hidden, until now. Audrey's pulse did not quicken. She simply nodded, even though no one could see her. She ended the call and stared out into the rain, every thought falling into place like chess pieces on cold marble. He knew she would be here. He had orchestrated this. Not just the flight, the deal, the moment. She turned slowly. Jason stood near the espresso bar, speaking to a staff member with casual charm. That charm had opened more doors than truth ever could, but it would not work here. She crossed the lounge with silent precision, heels muted by carpet and conviction. He saw her coming. His smile faded into something still, something careful. She did not wait for pleasantries. She asked how long he had known. His answer came without resistance. A few months. Long enough to see the names on the schedule. Long enough to plan. He said he needed to look her in the eyes. Audrey did not flinch. Her voice was soft, almost kind, but it cut deeper than anger. She asked if this was how he apologized now, through stock percentages and signed silence. He said no, that he came to listen, that he owed her more than words, that he owed her truth. She stepped closer. She told him she did not come here for apologies. She came to close a deal, and now she had something more valuable than signatures. She had leverage. Jason's eyes shifted, not with fear, but with recognition. The woman in front of him was not the same one he had once underestimated. She had learned the game he played, and mastered it. She leaned in, her voice low enough that only he could hear. She said if he thought this was about unfinished business, he was wrong. This was about power, and she no longer asked for it. Jason nodded once. He said he respected her. She told him respect was irrelevant. Control was the currency now. As she turned to leave, he reached for her name, said it like a memory he still wanted to keep alive, but Audrey did not stop. She walked back to her seat near the window and opened her laptop. Her reflection stared back at her in the black screen. Calm, exact, unbothered. The merger would go through. Jason would keep his shares, but she would own the room when the ink dried. The storm outside had trapped them both in place. But Audrey had already moved far ahead. The dining area was tucked behind frosted doors, far from the crowded gates and vending machines. Candlelight flickered low on polished mahogany. Silverware rested on white linen, untouched. A bottle of red breathed between them, its label discreet and expensive. Audrey sat with her spine straight, her face calm, the stem of her glass poised between steady fingers. She had told herself this was strategy. One dinner, one conversation, no openings, no softness, just observation. But the quiet hum of the room and the low timbre of Jason's voice made memory feel too close. He spoke first, not with charm or rehearsed lines, but with something heavier. He told her the last 5 years taught him more than success ever could. That money had filled the spaces, but not the silence. That the power he once clutched now felt more like armor than reward. She listened, not because she believed him, but because she wanted to know which parts of him still lied. Which parts had changed. Which parts remembered her not as a headline or threat, but as a person. He asked about her rise, her victories, the quiet rooms she conquered with grace and grit. She offered little, a nod here, a half-smile there. She had learned long ago that giving less made people reveal more. Dinner arrived in courses, light fish, wilted greens. She touched her fork to the plate, but barely ate. Jason, for all his smooth edges, ate like someone who knew how to wait. They spoke of cities, investors, missed calls. He said he read every article about her, that each success had felt like a bruise and a blessing. She said nothing to that. The waitress returned with dessert, small bowls of something sweet and fleeting. She placed them gently on the table. Jason reached into his jacket and set a sealed envelope beside Audrey's wine glass. She did not move. He told her to open it. She slid a fingernail under the flap and pulled out the pages. Her name was on the top line. Below it, bullet points and memos, internal emails, redactions, and then a thread of messages from her board members, men who had toasted her in public, who had voted unanimously in meetings, and who had plotted, in secret, to reduce her shares during the merger, to water down her power before the ink dried. Audrey read every word. Her jaw did not tighten, her breath did not catch, but her pulse, deep beneath the stillness, changed tempo. Jason said he had access, that someone inside his legal team flagged it. He thought she should see it before it was buried. She looked at him then, really looked, not at the man who once stole from her, but at the one who, just now, had handed her the weapon she needed. She folded the papers and slipped them back into the envelope. Jason asked if she believed him now. Audrey rose from the table. She left her dessert untouched, her wine unfinished. At the door, she paused. The candlelight cast a glow against her face, soft but unyielding. Belief was irrelevant. She had evidence, she had timing, and now she had every reason to burn the entire room down. The sky was pale and clean by morning, washed of its anger. Runways glistened under sunlight, striped with fresh tire marks and second chances. Audrey stood at the gate in silence as boarding began. No apology from the airline, just a crisp new pass and the seat she should have had all along. 3A. She stepped onto the plane without expression. Her carry-on glided behind her. This time, no one blocked her path. No one argued. She settled into the wide leather seat and stared out the window as the terminal slowly pulled away. A hush settled over the cabin. The air was too clear, too still. It felt like the pause before something irreversible. Jason took his seat across the aisle. He did not greet her. She did not look his way. But silence, between them, no longer held hostility, only understanding. The kind born of exposure, of stripped illusions and choices laid bare. The engines rumbled to life. He leaned slightly toward her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "What are you going to do?" Audrey turned her head, just enough to meet his gaze. Her face was unreadable, calm, precise. She reached for her phone. Her fingers moved with deliberate grace, typing fast, attaching files, scanning names. The envelope he had given her now lived as a digital firestorm. Memos, emails, proof of intent, a boardroom betrayal dressed in business language, a coup disguised as strategy. She hit send. Somewhere below, servers lit up, screens pinged. An editor at a major tech publication opened her inbox and found a story ready to detonate. The plane climbed. Audrey leaned back into her seat and crossed one leg over the other. She tucked her phone into her bag without a glance at the screen. She knew the rhythm of fallout. It would begin before they landed. Beside her, Jason watched. Not in protest, not in pride, just quiet acceptance. He knew what she had done. And why. 30 minutes into the flight, a man 3 rows ahead gasped softly. His phone was still connected to in-flight Wi-Fi. News alerts buzzed through, one headline, then 5, then more. By the time the flight attendants wheeled out drinks, the cabin had shifted. Phones lit up like constellations. One executive muttered a name under his breath. Another stared at a news feed as if it had come alive. Panic rippled just beneath the polished calm. Audrey did not move. She sipped water and glanced out the window. The sky was blue, endless. Her reflection was clear in the glass. Jason spoke again, quieter now. "You did what I couldn't." She kept her eyes on the clouds. No response. Because this was never about him. Not anymore. This was about every room she had entered where her voice was counted last. Every hand she had extended that came back empty. Every yes that turned into a stolen no. By the time the wheels touched the ground again, Audrey Lee was no longer just a name on a rising stock chart. She was the storm that never waited for permission to land. The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime. Audrey stepped out, the hem of her navy dress grazing just below the knee. Her heels struck the marble floor with a rhythm that made assistants look up and executives clear their throats. She passed them without a word. The boardroom was already full. Men in dark suits sat with their eyes glued to their phones, jaws tight, fingers twitching. The news had broken less than 12 hours ago, but it moved like wildfire. Their names were in print now, not as leaders, but as architects of betrayal. Every message they had whispered behind closed doors was public record. Audrey entered without hesitation. Jason stood at the back of the room. No briefcase, no seat. He had not been invited, but no one asked him to leave. He stood with his arms loosely crossed, his face unreadable, watching. Audrey moved to the head of the table. No one spoke. She pulled out the chair. The sound scraped against silence. Then she sat. A few of the men tried to meet her gaze. Most did not. Their screens still glowed with headlines and shareholder statements. Stock prices falling, public outcry mounting, a flurry of internal messages asking how it got this far. Audrey folded her hands on the table. She did not raise her voice. She thanked them for coming. Then she began. Her words were measured, each one chosen like a weapon disguised as grace. She walked them through the timeline of their own downfall. The emails, the financial maneuvers, the proof of collusion, the moments they underestimated her, not just once, repeatedly, systematically. She paused once, just long enough to let the weight settle. No one interrupted. She explained the steps that would follow: immediate resignations, reallocation of shares, a public commitment to equity, transparency, and female leadership. Legal cooperation would be rewarded. Resistance would not. When she finished, she leaned back slightly, not in retreat, in finality. A man at the end of the table opened his mouth to speak, but another one next to him placed a hand on his arm. He stayed quiet. Jason did not move. He simply looked at her the way someone watches a fire they once feared become something controlled, something necessary. Audrey stood. She looked at no one in particular. Then she left the room the same way she entered, calm, certain, untouched. The doors closed behind her. Jason followed a beat later, catching up in the hallway. He said nothing, just matched her stride as they walked toward the elevators. She did not thank him. He did not ask for it. But when the elevator opened and she stepped inside, she glanced at him once, the faintest softness in her eyes, the kind that did not erase the past but acknowledged the complexity of what remained. The doors closed. Power, she had learned, was not about volume. It was about presence. And today, Audrey Lee filled every inch of the room. The light in her office was softer in the late afternoon, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The city glimmered below her windows, humming with ambition and exhaustion. Audrey stood with her back to the door, reviewing notes on her tablet, until the soft knock interrupted. Jason stepped inside without waiting for her to turn. He paused just past the threshold, holding nothing but a single folder. No entourage, no briefcase, just him. She did not invite him to sit. He did anyway. The folder made a faint sound as he set it down on her desk. Inside were the papers. Signed. Final. Control of the merged company transferred to her name. Her title would be sole CEO. No co-chair, no oversight, no fine print in small fonts. She glanced at the cover but did not open it. Jason spoke slowly, his voice low. He said he had built his empire from leverage and instinct. But she had built hers from nothing. No safety net, no name to lean on. Just intellect and fire and the kind of silence that outlasts noise. He said this seat belonged to her now. Audrey said nothing. The skyline behind her burned gold. She turned finally and met his eyes. Not with gratitude, not with softness, just clarity. What did he want? That was the only question that mattered. He shook his head slightly. Nothing, he said, not out loud. But it was there in the way he looked at her, in the way his shoulders settled lower than usual, like he had let go of something, like this was his offering. She walked to her desk and stood across from him. Her fingers brushed the folder but did not open it. He watched her the way a man watches a future he no longer tries to control. Not a negotiation, not a bribe, just a hope quietly placed on the table between them. She studied him. His jaw was tighter than usual, his eyes softer. She thought about all the rooms they had both sat in, the ones where he had the louder voice, the ones where she had the sharper truth. This was different. This was not about who won. She asked what changed. He said her, then he added, more quietly, me. Audrey leaned against the desk, her expression unreadable. There were no strings, but there was still weight. Not the kind that pulled her down, the kind that lingered between people who had seen the worst in each other and still sat in the same room. She did not give him an answer. Instead, she walked to the window. Jason rose from his seat. He lingered for a moment, waiting, hoping. But she kept her gaze on the city. He left without another word. When the door closed behind him, Audrey finally opened the folder. Her name stared back at her in bold print. The power was hers. The question now was what she would do with the man who had handed it to her. The ballroom shimmered under a ceiling of crystal and gold. Lights scattered like stardust across gowns and tuxedos. Waiters moved with silent grace, champagne flutes balanced on silver trays. Conversations floated like perfume, the kind of night built for spectacle and silence. And then Audrey walked in. The dress clung to her like liquid confidence, gold, backless, timeless. Her skin glowed under the chandelier's light. No announcement, no entourage, just presence, the kind that made people turn without knowing why. The hosts were mid-sentence when they noticed her. Their eyes widened, their smiles froze. She had not RSVP'd. After the headlines, no one expected her to show, especially not like this. Unapologetic, unafraid. Jason stood at the far end of the room, half in shadow, sipping whiskey from a low glass. His tie was undone just enough to suggest he had nothing left to prove. When he saw her, his grip on the glass loosened. A smile crept across his face, slow and certain, like he had just remembered who she was, who he used to be, and what he might still become. She walked toward him, each step deliberate. Her heels whispered across the marble. She did not rush. She never had to. They did not speak as she reached him. They didn't need to. He offered her his arm. She looked at it for a moment, then took it. Together they moved through the crowd, elegant, measured, the kind of pair that made people clear paths and lower their voices. Some watched with curiosity, others with unease. Everyone had read the articles, they all knew the headlines, but no one could agree on the story. They reached the edge of the room near a grand archway. Jason said something low. Audrey tilted her head, amused. She did not laugh, but her smile did something quieter. It landed. A reporter approached. Microphone ready, camera behind him blinking red. He asked for a photo, one shot. The new power couple, he called them. The woman who had shaken the industry and the man who used to rule it. Jason stepped back. Audrey stood alone. The flash caught her in perfect stillness. Chin slightly raised, eyes calm, a single hand resting on her hip, the dress catching every shard of light. The photo spread within minutes. Online, the caption read, "The woman who grounded giants." Jason returned to her side after the flash faded. She did not thank him. He did not expect her to. They stayed there for a moment longer, side by side, looking out over a room full of people who once doubted her. She did not need the spotlight anymore. She was the storm it followed. The engines purred like a promise, steady and low. Audrey sat near the front of the jet, the seat upholstered in soft leather, her initials stitched into the headrest with quiet pride. A silver folder rested on the table beside her, closed. The ink inside was still drying. Control of the company, final and undisputed. The last clause signed, the last loophole closed. Outside, her assistant waited by the stairs, head set in one hand, coffee in the other. No words were needed. This was the ending Audrey had written herself, not through revenge, through precision. But even with the power in her name and the sky within reach, something felt unfinished. She looked out the small window. The hangar lights flickered in the distance. Empty runway, open horizon. Then the sound came. Footsteps, measured. Not hurried. No wheels, no aids, no press behind him. Just Jason, the man she had met when her voice still wavered and her vision still needed explaining. He stepped up the stairs and paused in the doorway, the threshold of something uncertain. His suit was simple, no tie. The look in his eyes stripped of all certainty. Audrey did not rise. She did not speak. She only lifted her hand and motioned gently to the seat beside her. Jason entered. His steps were slower than usual. Not cautious, just honest. As if he knew he no longer belonged by default. He sat, exhaling quietly as the jet door sealed shut behind him. The pilot announced takeoff. The jet rolled forward, smooth and certain. Jason leaned back into his seat, his eyes not on her, but near her. Like he was still waiting to be told this was a mistake. He said he had stepped down, not because of the scandal, because it was time. He had sold his shares, left the board. The empire he once built, now someone else's to defend. He said he wanted to build something new, not alone. Audrey turned her gaze to the window. The earth was falling away now, the world softening beneath them. The clouds thickened, then thinned. She watched them blur like watercolors in motion. She did not speak. Not right away. Then, without looking at him, she reached across the space between them and took his hand. It was warm. It held no agenda. Jason closed his eyes. Her head tilted gently against his shoulder, the way people do when they no longer need to measure their strength. They said nothing. They did not need to. Some stories are not about perfect justice. Some are about what remains when the dust settles. What can be chosen after everything else has been taken or given. Outside, the sky unfolded in endless blue. Inside, two people sat side by side. No trophies between them. No guilt lingering above them. Only quiet. Only a scent. If this story lit a fire in you, share it. Every woman who's ever been told to wait her turn deserves to know. She is the turn. Comment below if you've ever been underestimated and let your power speak louder than their permission. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, drop a comment, and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Untold for more stories that uncover hidden struggles, celebrate strength, and remind us that every voice matters.